Imagine this. You've meticulously consulted the city bylaws and followed every guideline to set up a shed in your yard. Just as you're putting on the final touches, a cop shows up, accusing you of breaking the law. What happens next is shocking. He resorts to violence, turning a simple home improvement project into a nightmare. Stay tuned to uncover the gripping beginning of this story, and witness the unexpected twists that lead to a powerful conclusion. How will one woman's determination to stand her ground against injustice unfold? Don't miss this captivating tale of resilience and community support. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. On a quiet street in the heart of Maplewood, the sun shone brightly as Mrs. Ethel Jenkins, an elderly black woman with a spirit as vibrant as her garden, hammered the last nail into her new shed. It was a modest structure, painted a cheerful blue, and Ethel had spent weeks planning it. Just a little space for my tools and maybe a few flowers, she chuckled to herself, wiping sweat from her brow. The scent of freshly cut grass filled the air, and the sound of children laughing in the distance added to the cheerful atmosphere. Just then, Officer Brad Thompson, a burly white cop with a reputation for being heavy-handed, rolled up in his patrol car. He stepped out, his uniform crisp, but his demeanor harsh. "What do you think you're doing?" he barked, crossing his arms over his chest like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Ethel looked up, surprised. "Just putting up a shed, officer. It's my property, after all." "Not so fast," he sneered, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing. "You can't just build whatever you want. You know the law, right?" Ethel straightened her back, her eyes narrowing in defiance. "I've checked the bylaws, officer. There's nothing against it. I'm allowed to have my shed." "Yeah. Well, I don't like it," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "And I think you need to take it down. You think you can just do whatever you want around here. You're not above the law, old lady." "Excuse me," Ethel replied, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "I've done everything by the book. You can't intimidate me." "Intimidate? Oh, honey, I'm not trying to intimidate you. I'm trying to save you from making a fool of yourself," he shot back, a smirk playing on his lips. "You really think anyone wants to see that ugly thing in their neighborhood?" Ethel felt her blood boil, but she held her ground. "It's my property, officer. I have every right to build it." "Right? You think you have rights? You're just an old woman trying to play house," he taunted, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "You think you can just put up a shed and expect everyone to be okay with it? You're delusional." "Officer, you can't just," Ethel began, but before she could finish, he shoved her aside, sending her tumbling to the ground. "Get out of my way," he shouted, turning to the shed. "I'll handle this myself." He grabbed the shed and began to shake it violently, as if trying to uproot it from its foundation. Ethel struggled to her feet, clutching her arm, her heart racing. "You'll regret this, officer. You can't treat people like this." "Watch me," he spat, his face twisted in anger. "You think you can just break the rules? I'll make sure everyone knows what a nuisance you are. You'll be the laughingstock of this whole neighborhood." As he continued to shake the shed, Ethel felt a surge of determination. "You're going to pay for this," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'll make sure everyone knows how you treat people." "Go ahead and try, old woman," he sneered, but as he turned back to her, he noticed a neighbor watching from across the street, phone in hand, recording the entire incident. Panic flickered in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with bravado. "You think you can just film me? You're all going to regret this." Ethel's neighbor, a young man named Marcus, stepped forward. "You can't just bully her like that, officer. She's done nothing wrong." "Stay out of this, kid," Thompson growled, his voice low and threatening. You don't know what you're getting into. But Marcus stood firm. I know enough. You're the one who's out of line. As Officer Thompson stormed off, Ethel felt a mix of anger and fear. She limped inside her house and picked up the phone. Hello, yes, I'd like to file a complaint against Officer Brad Thompson, she said, her voice steady despite the pain. He assaulted me for no reason. Days passed, and the incident spread like wildfire through the community. Ethel's neighbors rallied around her, sharing their own stories of Officer Thompson's aggressive behavior. He's always been a bully, one neighbor said. It's about time someone stood up to him. Ethel, supported by her friends, gathered evidence and testimonies. We can't let this go unchallenged, she declared at a neighborhood meeting. We have to show that we won't be intimidated. Meanwhile, Officer Thompson was oblivious to the storm brewing against him. He strutted around the precinct, boasting about how he'd put that old lady in her place. She thought she could just build a shed and get away with it, he laughed to his fellow officers. I showed her who's boss. But whispers of his actions reached his superiors, and soon, an internal investigation was launched. The captain called him into his office one afternoon. Thompson, we need to talk about the incident with Mrs. Jenkins, he said, his tone grave. Nothing to talk about, sir, Thompson replied, shrugging. She was breaking the law. I was just doing my job. Doing your job. You assaulted her, and there's video evidence, the captain snapped. You've got a history of using excessive force. This isn't the first complaint we've received. Thompson's bravado faltered. But No buts. You're a liability, and we can't tolerate this behavior any longer, the captain interrupted, his voice stern. We're launching a full investigation. Ethel received a call from the precinct days later. Mrs. Jenkins, would like to discuss your complaint, the voice on the other end said. Can you come in? When she arrived, she was met by the captain. We've reviewed the footage and the statements, he said, his tone grave. Officer Thompson has a history of using excessive force. We take these allegations seriously. Ethel's heart raced. So, what happens now? We're terminating him, the captain replied. He's been a liability, and we can't tolerate this bay. Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content. Ethel felt a mix of relief and triumph. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling. It's not just about me. It's about everyone he's hurt. As the news broke, the community erupted in celebration. Justice has been served, her neighbors cheered, gathering outside her home with flowers and homemade treats. Ethel smiled, her heart swelling with pride. But the twists didn't end there. Just as Ethel was about to relax, she received another call. Mrs. Jenkins, it's the mayor's office. We'd like to honor you for your bravery in standing up against police misconduct. Ethel could hardly believe it. Me? But I was just trying to protect my home. That's exactly why we want to recognize you, the voice replied. You've inspired others to speak out. On the day of the ceremony, Ethel stood on stage, the crowd cheering her name. I didn't do this alone, she said, her voice strong. We all have a voice, and we must use it to stand against injustice. No one should live in fear of those meant to protect us. As she stepped down, she spotted Officer Thompson in the back of the crowd, his face pale and filled with rage. He pushed through the crowd, trying to get to her, but the community closed ranks around her, protecting her from his fury. Get away from her. Marcus shouted, stepping forward. You're not welcome here. Thompson's face twisted in anger. You think you can just take me down? I'll make sure you all regret this. You're nothing but a bunch of nobodies. But instead of fear, Ethel felt empowered. She had turned a moment of violence into a catalyst for change, and she knew this was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the community continued to rally around Ethel, organizing meetings and discussions about police accountability. "We need to make sure this doesn't happen again," one neighbor said. "We have to stand together." Ethel became a symbol of resilience and justice in Maplewood, reminding everyone that even in the face of adversity, standing up for what is right can lead to powerful change. And as for Officer Thompson, his reputation was tarnished, and he found himself ostracized, a reminder of the consequences of his actions. In the end, Ethel's shed became more than just a storage space. It was a testament to her strength and the power of community. And every time she looked at it, she was reminded that justice, though sometimes delayed, would always prevail. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to help our channel grow.